The assassination of Charlie Kirk has elicited a very interesting response from the White House and from President Trump. We've got Charlie Kirk being honored in ways that usually are reserved for military honors. I think that the relationship between Donald Trump and Charlie Kirk is probably the first thing that we should talk about. Lucas, what can you tell me about that relationship? Because when I'm seeing him get these kind of military honors, that the flag is at half mast, this is the type of stuff that I would not have expected to see bestowed upon somebody who's just going out and doing debates on college campuses. This seems like there is a deeper relationship between Charlie Kirk and Donald Trump.
So Charlie Kirk, I think Charlie Kirk was a moral guidepost for Donald Trump. He was looked to by many in the MAGA community and by many politicians who were following Donald Trump as a as a moral backing for some of the nationalist positions that they're taking in their administration. And when I think about religions, I often think I in my mind, especially when I'm thinking about sects of Christianity, I say they are who's out or who's in religions. I call Lutherans a who's in religion. I call Baptists a who's out religion. They're very different in how they operate. It's I often think too, do they have a concept of hell as a place that we're coming from, or hell as a place that we're going to? These these sort of aspects of how you set up a religious discussion are very important. And Charlie Kirk came from, I say Baptist too, but this is a broader evangelical movement. And that broader evangelical movement is about working hard, about cutting out some of those people who aren't working as hard, or who don't have rights, or don't have as much uh, right to the pieces of the pie. So it was a great fit for Donald Trump and his nationalist policies to have a voice like Charlie Kirk wedded to him. He was also a voice, an inspiration to a lost generation. And that generation is lost due to the monetary policies of the United States, and the fact that rather than having any real economic output, we've been spinning our wheels for quite some time and just making more and more dollars. And the youth of America may not understand all of the intricacies of why that is occurring, or how it's occurring, but they certainly feel it in their lives.
So
And
Charlie Kirk is deeply connected with youth. I mean, I think what I've heard is that he had a following that was in the 20 to 30s. So he have, have after having done all of these college campus tours, he's connecting with young people, and this audience is akin to the audience that Andrew Tate has, where it's a lot of disaffected young men. Is that right? Am I picking up the way that this audience kind of flowed
it's
into his
funny.
message?
I do put him in the same basket as Andrew Tate, but Andrew Tate is Muslim. Andrew Tate has, believe it or not, like some measure a little bit more of humility. Charlie Kirk is operating from a power base in the identity of who belongs in America, and I think that's also very important with how he lines up with Donald Trump and Donald Trump's policies. So, but yes, a very important character. I overlooked the depth of the importance to him, but in discussions with friends in life, and sort of absorbing the amount of impact that his assassination has had throughout the world, I have begun to understand that this is on the level of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. And that goes because he was he was speaking to the hearts, not just the minds, but the hearts and minds of Americans. And that is a very deep and powerful, um, that that's a deep and powerful message, and he was leading that drive. So
Let's go to Rusty for a second. Rusty, I'm curious what your reactions are to Charlie Kirk's being given what seems to be military reserved for military honors.
I don't particularly agree with it. Just my own background of being somebody from the military, and I don't want to downplay the person that Charlie Kirk was or the impact that he made, but I just don't see the point of really going through the extent of half masting the flags and other things like that. I mean, he those like you said, that's meant for a certain type of person who has deemed that worthy of his honor and has achieved that and earned that ability. And I just don't think that becoming popular in social media uh, brings that same uh, equalness. I don't want to start seeing them half-masting the flag when Hulk Hogan dies or when Ozzy Osbourne dies or something like that. I mean, those are big, prominent people in the world too, and they recently died and they didn't have a half-mast flag. So I just don't see why Charlie Kirk gets that particular singularity or action taken for his death, but I just don't want to see it becoming more prominent.
I mean, I totally agree with you, Rusty. I see other trends in Trump's administration in which they're in which they are blending some of the distinctions that have been made with regards to military service. And I'm thinking about now uh, the attack on the Venezuelan boat in international waters. Um, when the Trump administration s- throws away some of the distinctions of our roles in society in 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 favor of what's popular and what's perceived, I think that that is a very dangerous side of what's possible with nationalists. I think that's part of the fears that people are tossing around their heads when they're using the word like fascist, even though fascism, uh, at its Latin roots, just means people who are unified behind a cause. Um, but but enough about we can go on broadly about Charlie Kirk's impact in the world or his role with MAGA and Trump society, but I'd really like to get into some of the details about his assassination, and more importantly, possibly or probably, um, some of the details about the reaction to his assassination that have occurred online, because I think that has um, some of the broadest impact in our lives going forward, and something that we should all be aware of.
Okay. Well, I guess we have to at least turn to the shooter for a moment. So we have got a young Mormon, 22-year-old Mormon, making a shot from 150 meters out. This, I guess, some people are saying this isn't that hard of a shot to make, so he wouldn't necessarily have had to been trained that long. Is Tyler, the young Mormon, really the assassin here, or is he being set up as a patsy like Lee Harvey Oswald was for the JFK assassination?
Well, Rusty, you probably have the most amount of experience with logistics of shooting. You've served as a Marine. You're a former Marine. Grant, I know that you also are an avid hunter. I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn door with a shotgun. So, what do you guys think about the likelihood of Tyler Robinson, 22-year-old, being able to make this shot from 200 yards away?
I mean, if I want to start, I think it's highly possible. I mean, the way that the weapons are made nowadays, the way that the sights are made, I mean, it's very easy to make a shot with a weapon that if you have the right weapon with the right bullet, and if he's in a right position, I mean, if he's laying down, if he's seated, if he's in a solid position, it's very easy to make a shot. I mean, I don't know all the details about the shot that he made, but 150-meter shot from far away, that's not that far away at all. I mean, I was doing that with iron sights without a sight at all on a gun back when I was 18 in the military. And with the games nowadays, Call of Duty, Battlefield out there, people are just running around acting like they're shooting guns. And it's not really that unlike Earth. I mean, unlike real life. I mean, when you're looking down the barrel of a gun in the game, they depict it to be like real life, and so a lot of the motions, a lot of the sights are the same when you're doing it in the game into real life, and people can just. I don't think it's really that difficult. I think you could take probably 10 people on the side of the street, and 8 of them could make that shot just randomly.
This one's a little harder for me. I mean, first off, you have to have the impetus and the drive to do this, and you have to have some amount of familiarity with firearms. Like, I don't just think that a person who is completely unexperienced with firearms, or that has never like grown up in a family where this was a part of the culture, could easily get into this without, I don't know, the parents saying, what is it that you're up to? What are you getting into? I mean, 22 isn't that far from being part of your household. I mean, was this Mormon, did he grow up in gun culture? Was he a hunter, or is all of his experience straight from just playing Call of Duty? I just, I don't know enough about him. Like, has this come to light? Like, what is his background in being able to just like have a firearm at that range and make a neck shot?
Well, I've seen a lot of pictures, and it seems that his family, one, his father was, I believe, a sheriff's deputy, maybe a sheriff. I know he's from, or I believe he's from Cedar City, Utah. And I don't know if you've ever been to Cedar City. I've climbed a lot in that area around St. George, and there are a lot of people whose identity revolves around hunting and being outdoors. It's rugged, rough terrain. Uh, sort of a lot of hills, semi mountains, and deserts around there. So I think that I think it likely that he had quite a bit of experience with firearms. But you also said something about the impetus to what would drive someone to take that shot, and that I find equally, if not more, interesting and compelling about him as being that shooter. And I say that because in part because of his age, also in part because of his. I'm going to assume he's Mormon because he's from a very Mormon, very devout Mormon area of Utah. I don't know if a lot of people are familiar, but there's something called the Strip that runs along the northern banks of the Grand Canyon in northern Arizona, and it is geographically isolated from the rest of Arizona. And so there's a lot of fundalist Mormonism in the area, the FLDS, if you haven't heard of the Free Latter-day Saints. And I think that's important to be like, there's a narrative that we have about the left and the right, that runs along our social media. And those who understand how that sifts out are often have experiences that come from urban or suburban lives. But that does not seem to me to hold true for more rural areas, and especially for people who live in rural areas and who have strong religious identities. And so when I saw that Charlie Kirk had been assassinated, one of the first thoughts in my mind was, I wonder if this was a devout Mormon. And I again, the reason that I say that is because there's a narrative about who constitutes a liberal and who constitutes a conservative. But if you think about what the values are with the community that you share, and you live in a world of people and that you identify with, that you share the same values with, the world can seem very different than somebody who comes from an urban setting and is having a conversation about their life from the vantage point of talking about those people who don't share their values. And Charlie Kirk's message, in large part, was about choosing, choosing this, choosing your religious community and building your religious community around you. So again, if you're from a rural religious community, that doesn't necessarily track and make sense. And I thought, well, if you layer that on the societal pressures that young men face more broadly. And we see this over and over and over with young men having other crises in their lives and turning to violence rather than to solve that. So it seemed to me that um, at some point in the wake of the assassination, I wondered if there was more complexity to the hit. But as the details of the shooter came out, I thought, no, I think this is born of the complexity of the different types of life in America and the perspectives that we bring to the political conversation. But I still thought there is a political propaganda and orchestrated. There is orchestration going on in the response to the assassination, and I think that is the most important thing to begin to understand about what is happening to
The
America.
social media response and how it's being framed up, how it's being promoted in certain ways, how it may be manipulated.
Absolutely. And I mean, immediately after the assassination, I made a mental note. Oh my gosh, I'm seeing they. I'm very wary. I'm very wary whenever the enemy is not defined and the motives of the enemy and the identity of the enemy are not defined. I think about the Red Scare, going back to Joseph McCarthy and the post-war America and the inaccuracies that were wrought there. And when I think about what's occurring there too, I think that we have, I think that Americans and other societies in the world have long been prey to people who are setting the political narrative and are very interested in perpetuating distinctions that do not match reality. So when I see they, and then that's followed with the left and the right, again, I think that the rural and the religious background of Tyler Robinson set him outside of that framework. And that's inconvenient to those people who want to further to further a conflict between a supposed left and right. But when I also look at what Donald Trump was trying to do and how the left and right are defined in terms of the imperial free market or the imperial free trade system, and that Donald Trump wants a fair trade system, I became concerned and I thought, well, um, those political enemies of Donald Trump who want to perpetuate the free trade system and have been doing everything that they can to confuse and dilute a reimagining of the world that he and Peter Navarro and JD Vance and many other people in his administration are trying to put forward. This is a prime opportunity to ratchet up those ancient those not ancient, but those very old tropes with regards to left and right. And when they're doing so, the assumptions that people who are buying into those narratives are making are with regards to a social order that's established by this free trade system. And so those people who want to continue to lock us into that system, and I'm talking about that imperial financial class, um, those people who exist outside of countries and who control the financial the international financial banks of the world and the companies are that and the states that are beholden to them. Well, this is a very ideal setup to keep America locked in that argument. And when I see the number of theys that are coming out and the talking points that are ratcheted up on social media, I say we have not just a bot problem, we have a propaganda problem. And
So
we
the
have
idea here is that Tyler Robinson, young man, 22 years old, from Utah, Mormon, just is disaffected with life, kills Charlie Kirk in a fit of rage for whatever reason. That became his target for who he decided should, feel his wrath, be assassinated. And it's not that any of these political state actors were directly involved, but they didn't let it go. They just realized an opportunity and then decided to pounce. Is that kind of framing it up?
That's
Yeah,
the
and
way I kind of see it. And the way that I've seen this is some of the bigger problem that's going on is not just the assassination, but the weaponization of the assassination by both sides, and the way that they're trying to um, take this as reason to do something else. And I see that this might be a bigger problem. And one of the big things that I've seen a lot is I don't really agree with it. Is a lot of the negative kind of reactions that have been taken by people doing social media posts and losing their jobs or things like that, where we're becoming more like Great Britain and Europe, whereas your social media interactions and your opinions can start to really interact with your real life. And I see that as becoming a huge issue.
I agree, and that's a layer above and beyond of disaffection, dissatisfaction with our politics and uh, ideals like our freedom of speech, our ability to express exactly what's on our mind. But again, when I go back and say, what is the most likely thing that occurred here? I'd say doubtful that Israel or Britain said, we want Charlie Kirk dead. But what is more likely is that they have groups of people and machines, bots that that have accounts, that have a presence on in the dialogues that are occurring on social media, as well as putting out stories into publications like the BBC that we're looking at here, and they say we are most concerned about the policies of the United States and how they affect us. And Donald Trump is making grand changes to the United States relation with other countries, with other countries of the world. And those countries are going to say, well, let's use the tools that we have to change the dialogue of what's happening to the people who control the government in some small way in the United States. And whenever you have something that brings everybody to the same channel, talking about uh, the same thing that occurred online, you have a great chance to implant ideas and to direct the conversation in a way that didn't occur before. You have that moment. Um, if you've ever been at a big game and there was an injury or a surprise that occurred, and there's all of a sudden the whispering and the buzz of the crowd. Um, that's a great moment to insert yourself and to redirect the focus of the entire stadium. And I think they were poised to do so. And part of the calculation of how to do so is to ratchet up the tensions between them, to blame they, and also if your goal is to direct attention away from the changes towards nationalism and fair trade that Donald Trump is interested in and is actively pursuing, um, then to lock people into the roles of the free trade system, the definitions of what those roles are, the left and the right. Um, it's an ideal chance to do so, and I think that's what we were seeing happening uh, from the moment of his death, and still, I think that I'm amazed that many things are happening in the world of drastic importance. Nuclear war is. Nuclear war is a possibility as Europe and Russia have more and more strident rhetoric against each other. We have Israel attacking Qatar and other countries around them.
You're giving us the backdrop of the more serious things that are happening throughout the world, yet we're focused on Charlie Kirk. Is that kind of where you're going with it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the other thing that has been so interesting to me is to say, oh, who is going to take advantage for desperate moves in the world? And that, I mean, that runs from the theaters in Europe and the theater between Europe and Russia, to the theater in the Middle East, to the theater in Asia, in Eastern Asia, between I mean, we have the Bangladeshi, sorry, not the Bangladeshi, the Nepali revolution, a fomenting revolution in Indonesia. We have the disruption in Africa with the Sahel states throwing out France. There is a momentum for massive political change all throughout the world, and rather than people people having their regards for Charlie Kirk and lamenting his death, we are fighting about whose fault it is, and we're fighting about that in with words of with vague words, with vague pronouns, they, left and right, and blaming each other and having a big fight about that, rather than being concerned about what's going on in the world. And I mean, I, w- there could have been a nuclear bomb that was dropped somewhere in the world, and I don't know if America would have noticed. And that that might not have occurred. It could have occurred. We could find out at some point that, oh, the NEA, the international, the UN's nuclear watchdog, declined to investigate a bomb that was dropped somewhere in the litany of bombs that are being dropped around the world today. And sure enough, there's nuclear fallout coming from that bomb. America wouldn't even notice. And how convenient for those countries who wanna play dirty with other countries in the world. And if they didn't take advantage of it this time, they might be saying to themselves, "Well, the next time that something, happens in America to cause a fury, um, we're gonna have our bots ready, and we're gonna have our storylines and propaganda ready, and we're gonna have a number of military options that we're gonna take advantage of while the world is looking in another direction."
What else do you think is important with what we're considering here for Charlie Kirk? He's definitely the head of a large organization that managed to capture a lot of attention. You're painting it as it's not important in the broader perspective that, if we're paying attention to this, what is it that we're maybe missing out on in the rest of the world? I mean, this was certainly important to a lot of people. It was important to a lot of individuals that followed Charlie Kirk, and if he massively connected with a lot of young people, this is the audience that is chased by politicians, by advertisers, by many. So he had the ear of people that are very desirable in our society. But you're saying in the long run, he wasn't that important, and that there's bigger, broader things going on than what Charlie Kirk was doing.
I mean, Charlie Kirk is very, very important. I don't wanna take that away, but Charlie Kirk has been removed from impacting the conversation. And I think that domestically leaves his followers and leaves a predatory politician, with an opportunity in his wake. And I think about, um, one, I think about Bernie Bros, um, and the direct tie between those who were um, so supportive and so identified, those people in America, and especially the Bros, who were so identified with Bernie Sanders. Charlie Kirk was operating outside, a direct political identity, and part of that was aligned with Donald Trump. But Donald Trump is burning through his second administration very quickly. And in the world of politics, there are already sharks in the water. I was not surprised to see, in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death, speculation about a possible political career that he would have had in his future. He's very young. I think he's 31 at the time of his death. That is very young. And when I think about a timeline, whenever politicians are really getting into their chops for national office, um, that comes 35, especially 40 years old, 50 years old, whenever they are a little wiser and emotionally mellow, enough to handle the waves in politics. Now, when I think about who might pick up that mantle, there's some obvious, two obvious people come to mind. One, JD Vance from Ohio, um, and Vivek Ramaswamy. But
Was there a relationship between JD Vance and Charlie Kirk? Were these guys well known to each other?
I mean, I think that they had to be well known to each other. Um, I don't know how closely they were working, but I do think that they were very aligned with their view for a nationalist, an America whose domestic policy was more concentrated for caring for the young Americans who have been left behind in the liberal global imperial world policies, and how America played into that liberal world order, as the place where money was made, and where only those in the financial sector, or who own assets, who are inflating in value along with the money that's being poured out to the rest of the world, got to play along with that. So I think any of those politicians who have this, and I put some descriptions on nationalists, because nationalists can have any number of criteria for how these politicians are trying to isolate domestic politics from foreign politics in order to counter some negative aspects that are going on inside the country. But I think those politicians who are concentrated on that, and especially those who have professed some sort of moral or religious picture of how a nebulous idea like God can give the people something to focus on, and to bring them into harmony so that they can work together. I think that is going to be appealing to the people who are following Charlie Kirk, and I think that for us to imagine somebody who's going to be picking up that audience, um, it would seem to me that somebody who's already on the political stage is going to have the biggest chance of picking that audience up, and it might just be JD Vance.
Well, the bigger narrative here is that we have social media that we all know is manipulated, and here maybe we're seeing even evidences of nation state actors helping to push a narrative of America in whatever direction that they want, and the maybe political assassination of somebody who is up and coming. That doesn't necessarily track with our discussion about this being Tyler. I mean, if this was kill a prominent person who is about to become on the political stage, that seems unlikely that was Tyler's motivation.
You know, if a politician is able to begin to draw America's attention to the inaccuracy of these labels of the left and the right, and to also begin to make ties to what a liberal actually is. And when I say that, this notion of liberty, that you're going to move around the world and you're going to have the same rules for everyone, is really what underpins these liberal values. And and so far, um, the Republicans have been unable to articulate how a neocon or a neoconservative is just a liberal who is concerned with foreign policy rather than domestic policy. But here we have a chance for politicians to begin to articulate how a fair trade and sovereign system changes what the political or the political power and political calculations and policies are domestically and internationally with our foreign policy. So I haven't seen that from JD Vance, except in I have seen that in the likes of the leaked signal chats in which he was overtly saying Europe interests are not our interests. I have seen that in his discussions or his shall we say obeisance to the leader of the Catholic Church. I can't remember who the current Pope's name is. All I can think of is Francis. I think it was Francis at the time. But also, I don't know. I think JD Vance might be the one person who can do so. But JD Vance is a little bit vulnerable in his ties to Peter Thiel and Palantir. So I don't know why I'm focusing on JD Vance, but as you ask these questions as to who might be picking up Charlie Kirk's mantle, just off the cuff, that's where my mind seems to be focusing.
Anything else we want to get into before we wrap it up? I feel like we're kind of almost at time, and I'm not sure if there's something else that we want to cover on this subject.
That's all I got. What about you, Rusty?
That's about all I've really got on the subject, except for just a quick point. I think that, seeing the outcome and the way that this has been addressed by the media, I see this action as something that could likely occur more than less. I see that, this is something that in the future is going to become more prominent than less prominent with the way that the outcome is being portrayed.
You mean more assassinations of prominent political people?
I don't think just political people. I think, just killing anybody, just like the leader of the pharmaceutical that was murdered by Luigi months ago. Just taking up that ability to murder anybody, and then just have that, and then just have that be the action. I think is becoming a lot more prominent and a likely action from people than saying, I wouldn't ever murder somebody. I think there's a lot more people coming up with the fact that, I could easily see myself doing that, or something that, or it could easily be something that I would do.
I think you're absolutely right about that, Rusty. In some ways, some of these things that have occurred were once unimaginable and also required calculation and subverting our values in a way that took a group of people with state interests in mind. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think that people imagine ways to do it, and it's a possibility. In the same way that once, in the wake of the Columbine shooting in Littleton, Colorado, we were all dumbfounded and thought, who could do such a thing? And now that Overton window is shifted. I'm afraid that it could also be true for assassinations until we recoup some amount of social order. Okay, that's all I got.
All right, and we'll see you next time on FOMO.